Wednesdays. I don't know why Garfield hates Mondays. It's Wednesdays. It's that the middle of the week and you're feeling a bit. Just got to keep on plugging at it. Well, to try to get over the hump and try to get a little more energy in my life, doing a little live stream, and what I'm hoping to do is to see if we can get the Pantheon recipe working on GitHub Codespaces. There's a couple things I'm a little concerned about here. One is I know that when my good friend and colleague John Olette tried to get Pantheon working on Gitpod, he had some issues. Mainly, the issue was that he had an SSH, or he had some sort of SSH key issue or something else. They had to actually make a patch in the Lando Pantheon recipe. So we have to go and make sure that we update our version of, we need to make sure we're running that most up-to-date version of Lando to get that going. The other thing I'm just concerned about is sort of a fundamental misunderstanding I might have about Codespaces, which is I'm really not sure what the best workflow would be for actually working with a Pantheon environment within Codespaces, because Codespaces sort of comes with this assumption that it's tied to a Git repo that's on GitHub. So I'm not sure how that actually plays with the Pantheon upstream. I'm guessing that we're just going to be we're going to be cloning down our project from Pantheon within the Lando environment, and then we're going to have to actually deploy changes from there to Pantheon, but I'm not sure. I'm wondering what that's going to look like within the VS Code interface. Anyway, let's see if we can get that far. So I'm going to start off from our Lando/Drupal dev environment repo. It's forked from Drupal. If you've seen any of our past videos, the one that John did on Gitpod, it started from this repo. The ones that I've done on GitHub Codespaces previously all started from this repo. If you haven't seen those, check them out either on our Twitch or on YouTube. Those are good places to start. This is very much me just screwing around. So we'll see how far we actually get with it today. But yeah, so I'm going to start off from this repo. I'm going to do, well, first I'm going to fetch our Drupal upstream just to have that up to date. That doesn't matter for our situation today so much, but it's always nice to have. So what I think I'm going to do, dev container, this is all the stuff needed for the VS Code dev container setup. So this is all the stuff that makes Codespaces work and would also make a local VS Code remote container setup work as well if you wanted to try to get that going. Which I need to do at some point. That'd actually be another good video to do in the future, but haven't tried that yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a quick look. So the Docker file is just our setup for VS Code. It has like our base image that we're actually running the VS Code dev container from, and config.yaml has kind of the more, this is the Lando setup that we use. This is actually a Lando config. And devcontainer.json does a couple of things to help set up our environment, mostly in this post create command. This Lando feature that just installs Lando, this installs Docker, so it's all there within our containerized environment that we're running on Codespaces. This post create command does a couple of things that are probably familiar to you if you use Lando, which is setting up that config file that I referenced previously, doing a Lando start, installing the necessary dependencies for Drupal. That's basically it. So at the end of this, we should have, when we start up our Codespaces environment, we should have a working Drupal 9 site, which is great. Oh, that makes me think of another video we should do. Just do a Drupal 10 site. I haven't messed around with that as much. Anyway, so I don't think we need to do much in the dev container to set things up. I think what we actually need to do is we're going to want to go check out, go to my terminal, which I helpfully do not have cleaned, but pump this size up on this a little bit for everybody at home. I'm going to go to my local version, Drupal dev environment. I'm actually torn because I could, so from here, I could edit. I'm going to open up my local VS Code here. And I could edit our Lando file that we have in here. Oh, that's really big. VS Code gets big fast. Could edit our Lando file in here and change over the recipe to Pantheon. What I think I kind of want to do, instead of doing that, let's try something slightly weird. Let's go in. Let's try spinning up. Okay, so we're going to try first. Let's try spinning up a new Codespace environment just based off of this Drupal dev environment. By the way, if you want to do this at home, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to enable your organization on GitHub. If you have an organization, I think you can do this with an individual account as well. You have to enable Codespaces by actually going into your billing settings and setting a monthly billing limit for Codespaces. So that's how you actually get access to this cool code tab, Codespaces tab that's on the code button. You can create a new Codespace. And what I'm guessing you'd want to do is actually just fork our Drupal dev environment repo that we're working off of right now. So that's how you would do this. If you want to mess around with Drupal and Codespaces with Lando, it's a great place to start. And I suspect you get use that, extend that to do whatever you want. Also cool to note, we could open this in our local VS Code desktop version. Right now, I'm just going to use the browser-powered environment that they give us, though. I'll bump the size there a bit. We should see this. This is going to run through our post-create commands here in a second. I'm going to let it do that. I'm curious actually why it's not doing that yet, because it takes a couple of minutes, and I don't know why. I'm waiting Codespaces. Yeah. I always think something's gone wrong, and then it just does it. But let's look at the create log and just see if it did anything weird. Linking on the name of those is the creation log. Where's I'm not? Nah. You know what I'm actually going to do? So what I'm going to do, because what I was going to do anyway, so I don't really care about the Lando environment that our default setup is trying to create, which apparently it's not, which this kind of goes to reinforce. I've talked about this in previous videos. Sometimes this post create command that is in the dev container settings in devcontainer.json, I feel like it just doesn't run. Because normally what happens is it pops up in a separate bash process that you'll see. It's like you get dumped out on this, and then another terminal tab will basically open up that runs your post create process. And this spin up, for some reason, that just never happened. But that's fine, actually. So what I'm probably going to do, I'm kind of curious, actually, if I go to workspaces, let's just make a new directory and make directory Pantheon, cd Pantheon. And let's try to do a Lando init right here, because we should have Lando. Yeah. Let's try to get Pantheon. Okay. Oh, man, I need to get a machine. I feel like I'm going to have to stop my stream really quick and go grab a machine token. Oh, I knew this was going to be a problem. I should have thought of a clever solution to this. Okay, I'm going to go, and this will be 2 videos. I'm going to grab a machine token and then come back. I'll be back, I swear, in 2 minutes. I'm cutting and pasting. That in there, hopefully that worked, because sometimes, as you saw, my browser needed permission for me to actually copy and paste things. Awesome, so we got that in there. Let's find Landobot Drupal 9. Hopefully that's a good site to start off with. It's already on my Pantheon account. generate a key. And what Lando's doing here, you see is Lando init, Lando bot Drupal 9 container. So this is just running some startup tasks, basically. It's a temporary Docker container that's running some startup tasks, Lando. So far, it seems like it's actually working fine. Great. So yeah, we have Git within our virtualized environment because we made sure we had Git. So there we go. I mean, like we actually have, that's cool. So we just took and we just did a Lando init on this generic Codespaces environment. And we, yeah, now we have our Pantheon site here. So by running Lando init, what Lando init does, if you're not familiar, all it does is it's really just creating a Lando file. So if I can do SL here, you'll see, where is that? Why am I not seeing it? That's kind of funny, actually. There should be a, oh, that's weird. The settings on, anyway, their settings for the terminal must be different because it's not showing hidden files because it clearly exists. If I look at, oh, well, they don't have them on here either. But I guess that makes sense because it's, you know, have this editor. It's a nice editor for us here. But yeah, so you can see there's this this lando.yaml. Great. Let's get out of here. All right, you let me get into command mode. I literally gonna have to create another terminal. This is fun too because you're going to see. Oh, okay, there it goes. Like one of the things I think that's tough about running in Codespaces and running within the browser environment is that you're running within a browser environment. So sometimes it's like, you know, your focus might be on a different window or something like that. It just adds a little bit of, in my mind, a little bit of hassle. So, but let's try running Lando start. And we'll see if this actually works. I was surprised that it so seamlessly pulled down the code base, connected to Pantheon and everything. So I think we are running the latest version of Lando that has John's updates in it that he made to make this possible. Thank you, John. You're awesome. But yeah, so now we're actually pulling down all the different Docker images that are necessary to run the Drupal 9 Pantheon style recipe. I want my burgers, I don't want an animal style, I want a Pantheon style. I wonder what that looks like. Maybe it's vegan. Maybe it's the Matt Cheney Pantheon style burger is a vegan thing. Good for someone like me. Typical California vegetarian. So many stereotypes packed into one person. It's really really sad. I don't surf though, so got that going. Okay, so we still got lots of this stuff going. So much downloading. I think after this one, I have to remember though to delete this machine token. I'm assuming that they generated like a unique. Anyway. Great. Looks like we're pulling down. We were able to actually connect to the supply side and everything. And I'm trying to think of anything else exciting to talk about while doing this. Actually, one exciting thing. So it's pulling down. You see, it's pulling down Bitnami and MariaDB. For a long time, we made a decision years ago to use Bitnami's Docker images, which seemed like a really good decision at the time and played out pretty well for a while. We feel like that was sort of a mistake at this point. We really wish that we were on the official, just Nginx or MariaDB Docker images at this point. And we're definitely moving that direction. One of the big things where that kind of bit us in the hindquarters was when we were working on M1 compatibility, the Bitnami images, I don't think still they don't have compatibility with M1, at least their MariaDB instant, their image didn't. So specifically for a lot of Pantheon users, we're getting this problem. And I actually went and updated our Pantheon recipe. So if detects, if you're running on M1, if you're running on the ARM64 architecture, it will actually use the just base MariaDB image, which was kind of a breaking change. I mean, it was a breaking change for anybody that might have had an M1 installation working for some reason of Pantheon, but there were so few people doing it at that point that we were okay doing it. So great. And so this is running. The thing that's kind of interesting that I'm not seeing here, I'm not sure why, is I'm not seeing my ports tab. So it's either not auto-detecting these ports, maybe because it's not within the directory that it's expecting it for. I'm kind of curious if I try accessing this, is it actually going to go through? Yeah, okay, cool. So no, if I click a link within there, okay, so that was probably, oh, of course, I clicked on the HTTPS, so that's not going to work. That's one thing, and we talked about this in our blog post. Oh, lame. Okay, so we have some sort of, maybe didn't successfully pull down the database. We'll take a look at that. But finishing that thought, these HTTPS links don't work on Codespaces, and that's actually why we have that custom config.yaml, if you remember that, in the dev container directory. It disables the proxy for Lando. And actually, thinking about it, I'm curious why. Oh, yeah, it disables the proxy URLs. So that disables just the nice URLs, like the, in this case, maybe the site would be called landobot drupal9.lndo.site. Those nice URLs is what we disabled in that config.yaml. And in the Lando file that we ship with the Drupal dev environment, we actually disable the SSL links that are served by default for Codespaces. So we do this SSL false in our app server. And I probably should have just put that in there. The only reason we do this is just because it's distracting. It's weird when you go to you try to click on this thing and it forwards you to the nice Codespaces environment, but then it says bad request, sent an HTTPS port. And there's a way to get around that in the ports interface here, which I have no idea why we're not seeing that. And I actually don't know how to get to it other than usually when you have, when it recognizes containers running. Interesting. So it doesn't even recognize that these containers that we clearly have running here are running. Yeah, and I just don't know enough about how to fix these things up. This is going to be something I'm going to have to research further. But yeah, so normally if we go back and we actually spin up our Lando site for the Drupal dev environment repo, which is the one that's showing up in VS Code here, I'm sort of interested actually if I could navigate somehow, if I could open in this editor, if I could open up this other file. So yeah, I'm not even sure if I could. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there is a way. Maybe there's a command they enable or something. But anyway, so if we spun up, if we actually run Lando start on this other Drupal dev environment default repo, that's the one that's open within VS Code here in Codespaces, it should at least pop up a ports tab here that'll actually show us all the open connections that are being forwarded by Codespaces. Oh, that's weird. It's not even doing that. So I think something's a little funky with this spin up for some reason. And I'm not sure why. This is the joys of working with something like Codespaces, and this is something I think we've also seen with Gitpod. I mean, these are still kind of early products. I mean, we were still a little bit on the bleeding edge of development here with cloud development. Some really good solutions. I mean, it's totally workable as you've seen. We should go back to the Pantheon environment and just see if we can see what went on with that. Actually, I have an idea what may have on with that. I don't think in our build, we have a vendor folder. Yeah, so it ran composer install at some point. I'm kind of curious to see, I mean, if there's anything else that needs to be installed. I'm going to run composer install really quick just to make sure. Okay, yeah, cool. Yeah, so 45 packages you are using are looking for funding, and Lando is the 46th, which is why you should definitely sponsor us if you can. But yeah, the thing I'm kind of curious about this. So there's a couple of things I'm noticing that would make this a little bit difficult as a workflow. One, what we should have done is we should have just edited the lando.yaml. Maybe that's the next thing we should do is just edit this lando.yaml and then try spinning up a new Codespace environment around that. The other thing that I'm kind of curious about, and this section maybe we can get a little bit of clarity on just right here. I'll up the size of this a bit. Is what it would take. So, okay. Okay, interesting. Yeah, so our what we were seeing there was the create a terminal session. That's okay. What we were seeing there was just that our in the git diff was just that we overwrote lando.bot Drupal9's lando.yaml that was in the Pantheon source control. So I'm going to just do a git checkout and get rid of that. What I might do though, just for fun. Oh, no, I keep on forgetting that it doesn't exist here, but I'm just going to create a bogus file here. Come on. Okay. Keeps on getting confused for no reason there. I'm going to try seeing if I can just push this back up to Pantheon. Okay. Yeah. So we'd have to enter. We'd have to enter a password. Okay, that makes sense. So yeah, for those, so the we don't have an SSH key, which this actually may be. I wonder if there's if this was the issue that John was running into that should be resolved. So maybe we're not running the correct version of Lando for that. That might be another thing for us to take a look at. It's interesting though. So this does work. We're able to get ourselves spun up. I think if we're going to do a better configuration of this, we would want to just spin up a new. I think we'd actually. I mean, I guess the best thing to do would be to fork our repo to actually use GitHub as our source repo for our Pantheon project, which I know a lot of people. I mean, that's what back in my agency days. That's definitely what we did with most of our Pantheon repos. Is we'd actually run a GitHub repo as our source repo, and we'd have a GitHub action to deploy out to Pantheon or another CI provider. And back then it wasn't GitHub Actions, but yeah, we would have some sort of mechanism to either use GitHub as the core repository or vice versa. I think we were usually doing it with GitHub as being the repo of truth. So yeah, so I think that's what you would want to do, because then you could actually spin up a Codespaces environment off of that repo that is actually synced up with Pantheon, and then you could just push back to the GitHub environment and have that deploy back to Pantheon, which probably, I'm guessing, is your workflow already if you're doing things with GitHub and Pantheon, and you're someone that's a little bit above the curve. But if you're just starting to figure out what you want to do, that's sort of what I would aim towards. I sort of feel like there is a quick and dirty here where you could just have like a GitHub repo with a lando.yaml in it and then a dev container repository. So imagine like our demo repo here, which right now has all of Drupal in it. If we just stripped away all of Drupal, and instead of having all of Drupal, we just had a dev container, this dev container folder, and then a Lando YAML file that had just basically was like we had run Lando init on this thing. I think that would work. Although I guess for Pantheon, our Lando init actually does pull down the source code as well. So yeah, I think you would have to do mirroring of your Pantheon project. This is sort of interesting too, because I know Gitpod this is probably a place, and I've talked to a couple of people on Slack now that echoed this sentiment, where they were like, yeah, we would consider Codespaces. It's pretty cool, but we're either using something like Pantheon or we're using say we're like using GitLab, right? Or we're using Bitbucket. So we obviously can't use Codespaces. So this really does start to show some of the limitations of Codespaces as a proprietary product, where it's like, yeah, this is very narrowly focused on GitHub use cases. It's more of a less of a standalone dev solution for doing everything, and more of an adjunct to your GitHub experience. So it's interesting. It's interesting to think about that as being, I know it's sort of obvious because it's a GitHub product, but I think that is actually a really salient difference and something to consider if you're considering, moving yourself or part of your team or whatever to cloud development environments. Gitpod does seem to be the player that's more geared towards being agnostic in that situation, rather than forcing you into kind of the single GitHub way of doing things, which if you want to do things that way, it's a really nice environment and ecosystem to be within. But if you don't, and you're not invested in it, you don't want to invest in it, then yeah, like not going to make sense to probably just use Codespaces for doing this. You're going to want to use something else, whether that's Gitpod or hosting your own VS Code dev container remote development solution. Anyway, I'm yakking too much. I have some homework to do, I think, on researching this, but I think what we've seen is like, yeah, it's possible to run Pantheon on Codespaces. There's some workflow issues that we sort of need to figure out, and think of a better way to template out if we were really going to use this to work actively on a project, rather than just kind of showing that it sort of works. I'm curious. I mean, we had an error here, which looks like maybe just the database didn't pull down. I kind of actually why I'm not even right command SQL. It's like what SQL DB import. Oh, I'm just thinking of Lando poll in this case. Generic Lando poll, which when hooked up to our Pantheon instance should allow us to. We didn't really need to pull code though. We don't want the database. Pull in DB. We'll pull files too, why not? I'm curious to see if this works. Might take a minute. Confirm. Okay. Let's see if that actually made any difference with our situation here. It's thinking. Ah, there you go. Yeah. So, yeah, we just needed to run a Lando poll. I forgot that wasn't part of the. It's not part of the Lando start by automatically. I'm sure if we looked at our Pantheon docs, they'd probably tell us that on the Lando site. But yeah, of course, yeah. Lando poll. That's the third thing you should do. Lando init, Lando start, Lando poll if you're doing a Pantheon thing. So that's just user error on my part. So that works perfectly. Yeah, but I think that kind of shows you. I mean, like there's definitely there's an inkling here of something that could be possible. I think it really relies though if you're using GitHub as your core version control, CI, CD, all your other stuff. That, probably project management as well. I know we as a agency when we used to do agency work, that was definitely something that we were pretty centered around the GitHub ecosystem. So Codespaces probably would have made a lot of sense for us. But if you're not, then you might want to look at something else. Anyway, I'll leave you all there for today. But thank you so much for watching. And definitely 12:30 Pacific or thereabouts, give or take 10 minutes, slash 3:30 Eastern if you're on the East Coast. That's when we're going to be doing these pretty much every day throughout the weekdays. Maybe some variability if John gets on here. Maybe we can coax Mike on occasionally. But yeah, it's just our time for exploring new things and doing that live with folks. If you want to catch us live, definitely follow us on Twitch and on Twitter. That's where we're always pinging folks to let them know that we're going to be on. And if you just want to kind of catch up later and flick through a video, check out our YouTube, follow us there. Yeah, and I will hope to see you around on our next video. Have a good Wednesday.